Hour number 2 on a football Friday. Birds 365. Jody Mack with Phil Colarulo. What are you doing wearing Philly stuff? Who do you think you are?
Red October, Jody. Red October, my man.
I know it's coming, but we are Birds 365. So you do look like the coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. All right, if you were the coach of the Eagles, Bill Colarulo, and this Washington team coming to town, they win their first 2 games. All right, they didn't beat any world beaters in the first 2 games, but they're 2-0. They're in the same position the Eagles were last week, and they just got pummeled by the Buffalo Bills last night in their own house, which supposedly has new excitement because of ownership change. That excitement was over rather early last week against Buffalo. But what do the Commanders bring to the table that you at least have to say you respect? You may not fear, but you respect this aspect about the Commanders. You got one?
Well, yeah, I think if you look at that offense, you have to respect a little bit their wide receiver room. Now, we saw Sam Howell doesn't have time to throw the football, but they don't have a bad receiving core if somehow that offensive line can give him some time. But you look at the flip side, the defensive side of the ball, their defense hasn't been playing horrible. It's just the offense has put them in some bad spots. How many turnovers did they have last week? 5 against the Buffalo Bills, giving up 9 sacks. So field position was a real problem. But I think if you look at it, wide receiver room for the Commanders isn't bad, and the defense hasn't been bad. But outside of that, I think this is a big win for the Philadelphia Eagles this week. I really do.
Yeah, I'm having a tough time coming up with any way that I think the Commanders could win the game. But as I said way back at the start of this show, I felt the same exact way last year when the Eagles were 8-0 and the Commanders came in. All right, they're going to, and sure enough, the Commanders found a way to win, mostly through Eagle era. That I used the phrase Eagles shot themselves in the foot last year, and they did. Any chance that happens this week? They've been better at keeping the football under wraps because they've run it as much as they have. Is there any chance that this turns into a turnover fest and it becomes a who makes the bigger mistake type game?
Well, look, to give you the cliche answer, it's always possible any given Sunday and all that. But I think the one advantage we have this week as an Eagles team, we're not smelling ourselves after those first 3 weeks. Although they're 3-0, they haven't put it all together. So this isn't one of those quote-unquote trap games that you've seen in years past. They were 8-0 going into that game. Everybody was talking about them as the best team in the league, and they came out a little sloppy. I don't think you'll see that on Sunday because this team knows they haven't put it all together yet. They're not looking past the Washington Commanders in any way. So I think you'll see a very clean, efficient game from this Philadelphia Eagles team. And I just did a video on my Instagram right before we came on about this. I think one of the advantages the Eagles have this week as well is the 3 teams that they've played, week 1, week 2, and week 3, are 3 of the top 4 teams in the NFL when it comes to blitzing the quarterback. Minnesota blitzes the quarterback 63% of the time. That's number 1 in the NFL. You look at the Tampa Bay Bucks, they're number 3 in the NFL 45% of the time. And then you have New England 44% of the time blitzing the quarterback. Washington doesn't blitz the quarterback a lot. They've only blitzed quarterbacks 24% of the time, which is 21st in the NFL. So when you talk about our passing game and it's struggled a little bit over the first 3 weeks, these were teams that bring a lot of blitzes and try to confuse the quarterbacks. You don't have that as much with Washington. So I expect this passing game to hopefully get rolling this week and everybody can calm down and say, hey, this Philadelphia Eagles offense is going to be just fine.
And I know this is going to be construed as sacrilegious by some Philadelphia fans when I say this here. If you don't need to blitz, you shouldn't blitz. Blitzing is acknowledging that you can't get there with 4. And oh, by the way, I'll give the Commanders at least as much. I think they can get there with 4. I think they've got one of the best defensive lines in the entire National Football League. Minnesota's telling you, we can't get there with 4. We need to bring 5. New England's telling you we can't get there with 4. We need to bring 5. Washington doesn't blitz because they don't think they need the blitz, and I agree with their defense coordinator. If you can't get there with the 4 talented players that they have up front, then there's something wrong to begin with. Then chances are you're in a bad spot anyway. So I would not put too much weight on the fact that, wow, the Commanders don't blitz. They don't blitz because they don't have to. And I think that is the one. If this game ends up being close, it'll be because of that, because their defensive line plays well. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, they have guys like Sweat, not Josh Sweat,
Different.
Sweat, and Chase Young, who haven't played great this year, but those guys are very good defensive linemen. They can get after the quarterback. And like I said, if you don't have to blitz, don't bring it. Washington does have 10 sacks in 3 games, putting them in the top 10.
As compared to the Eagles, who have how many?
Eagles only have 8, putting them at 18th in the NFL.
Yeah. So if they're ahead of the Eagles in sacks so far, that tells you they don't necessarily need to have to blitz. All right, Bill, the run versus the pass. The great debate here in Philadelphia over the first several weeks of the season. The Eagles have been as effective as they have running the football. Yes, the offensive line opens up big holes, but DeAndre Swift has been phenomenal at getting through them and making plays and getting yards even after contact. They have just been tremendous at controlling the game via the ground. But people like Jalen Hurts throwing the football to Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert. So they'd like to see more of that. What do you think the balance is this week? Is there a change from what they've done the first 3 weeks, which is more run heavy than pass, or do you think they just stick with what's working?
Well, if you look at Washington, they've been good against the pass. They're number 13 in the NFL against the pass. They're number 22 against the run. They're giving up 129 yards a game, which really, it doesn't matter who the Eagles play. They're able to assert the run. They're just that good. But you look at this Washington team and it would tell you, hey, let's run the ball, not throw the ball. But I do expect that passing game to get going. But one thing I wanted to tell everybody is calm down here. If you look at the numbers from last year to this year, I know they're doing it differently, Jody. They're not throwing the ball as much, but the net result has been the same. In 2022, I think everybody would describe this Eagles offense as being a high-powered, dominant offense. They averaged 389 yards a game. That put them number 3 in the league. You know what they're averaging a game this year? 384. So you're getting the same net result. I get it. We want to see them throw the ball, but average yards per play. Last year, 5.9 yards a play. This year, 5.4 yards a play. It's the same net result. We don't necessarily like how they're getting there, but they're getting there. And points per game, most important stat, points per game, 28.1 last year, 28 this year. So we got to calm down. Wins are wins, and the offense is producing.
And oh, by the way, the offensive line with their 2 stud star potential Hall of Fame guys, Kelsey and Johnson, as the anchors of that offensive line. And Mailata has become a young veteran, and then you got 2 very good young studs in Dickerson and Juergens. There isn't enough. I don't care how old they are. I don't care what their accomplishment is. It doesn't matter how long you've been playing the game or what you've already done. Offensive lines love to run block. They would rather go forward than go backwards. So you keep it a very important part of your team. Rather happy if you run the football. Yeah, I think they're going to do a bunch of that again this week. I just hope it's DeAndre Swift. And I get overly analytical when it comes to the running back position. It makes it sound like I'm a Kenny Gainwell hater, and I'm not. I like Kenny Gainwell. I think he's a nice player, and he's helped the Eagles out since he showed up here. He's just no DeAndre Swift. And last game, DeAndre got the more important carry. Swift got the late carries. Gainwell got the late carries when they were trying to just protect the lead and run out that clock at the last 9 minutes. But the Eagles made a statement when in the game number 1 of the season, DeAndre Swift got 1 carry. Are they going to be smart? I guess it's a fear I have, and it's probably unrealistic, that the Eagles, some of the Eagle coaching staff, specifically Johnson, the play caller, think that Gainwell is on the level of Swift. Do you have that same fear?
I do. Looking back at week 1, if they didn't win that game, we would be furious right now that they only gave DeAndre Swift 1 carry. I don't understand that at all. But when you look at DeAndre Swift, as good as he is, you can't give him the ball 28 times a game. If you look back at his career in 3 seasons in Detroit, He only had more than 15 carries 2 times in the previous 3 seasons. And he's really never had them back to back like we just saw. He had 28 against New England. He had, I believe, 16 against Tampa. So DeAndre Swift's your starter. He needs to be your running back one. But we can't forget about the other running backs because Swift has shown he cannot stay healthy carrying the load for a 17-game season. So I don't think that you're going to see them lean on Kenny Gainwell like they did in week 1. But I do think you need to mix him in. I think the magic number for Swift is probably somewhere between 12 to 18 touches a game. But I think more than that, you start to really risk. He's not a big back, and he's never done it in the past. And we've seen he's had an injury history throughout his career in Detroit.
Yeah, I can't play football scared. He should run what you need him to run on any given week. And if he gets hurt, he gets hurt. And I know his history is his history, but I can't. If you're going to get in the midst of a game, you can't adjust on the fly and go, oh, too many carries for DeAndre. We need to get him off the field. No, that to me is not the way to attack a team who comes in here with a chance, because the Commanders did beat the Eagles in Philadelphia last year in a matchup where I know I got that game wrong because I didn't think the Commanders could stay on the field with the Eagles. They beat them as soundly down in Washington previously as they did. So I thought it would be a runaway here in Philadelphia. It was not. But Taylor Heineke played different. He did get the ball out a heck of a lot quicker. And as I just finished telling John, I don't think Sam Howell is capable. You could have meetings. You can work on it in practice. You can say you got to get the ball out in just over 2 seconds. Yeah, okay, fine. Sam Howell is going to try. I don't think he's capable of doing it and doing it well. Do you have any worries about Sam Howell? If he gets well coached up, we think the enemy's a pretty good offensive coordinator. You think he'll have a game plan in place. Does Sam Howell give you any trepidation going into this game?
He doesn't. And I wasn't a fan of Sam Howell's even in the offseason. I know there were some people who were high on him, but I wasn't that high on him all offseason coming into this year. And then you look at what happened to him last week and what's happened to him in these first 3 weeks. Any quarterback is going to struggle and be gun shy when you're getting that much pressure in your face. And I expect more of the same this week. I think you'll see Sam Howell make some mistakes. He's not a good enough quarterback, and very few quarterbacks are, to be able to overcome that bad of an offensive line. But when you put a young guy like Howell, who I don't think is that talented anyway, on top of it, he doesn't scare me at all. And you look at this Philadelphia Eagles team, we talk about it every single day now, how good the interior defensive line is with Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, Fletcher Cox, Milton Williams, even Marlon Tuipulotu getting a sack last week. And you look at the center for this Washington Commanders team, Nick Gates, he hasn't been very good in pass protection, just like Hainsey wasn't last week in Tampa. And you get that type of interior pressure in your face, it makes it really difficult for quarterbacks. So I don't expect Sam Howell to do much this week. And I'm also hoping that we start to see our defensive ends, our edge rushers, get after him as well, going against some of these tackles that Washington has. So Sam Howell, it's going to be a long Sunday, hopefully, again.
The tackles got eaten up last week by Buffalo's pass rush, and you're right. It would be a nice breakout week for Hassan Reddick and or Brandon Graham to get themselves a couple of sacks. All right. Before we take our next time out, we hope to be joined by Grant Paulson from 106.7 The Fan down in D.C. To talk Commanders aspect of this matchup come Sunday. Assuming the Eagles are more effective throwing the ball this week than they have been the last couple of weeks, not because they need to get away from the run, but they'd like a little bit better balance, that they've had to lean on the run a little bit more than most people expected and or maybe even the Eagles wanted. We hear the coach talk all the time about the offense runs through A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. Because the offense passing game hasn't been huge, neither one of any of these three guys hasn't had a quote-unquote breakout game yet. If there's a breakout game to be had by one of their three receivers, who do you think most likely it is this week?
Well, selfishly, I'm hoping it's Dallas Goedert because I got him on my fantasy team, and we haven't seen much from him. But it's hard to predict, Jody, because it's really going to depend on who this Commanders team puts Fuller on, because he's been a really good cornerback for that Commanders team. He's probably the biggest bright spot of their start for these first 3 weeks. He's one of the highest graded corners in the league, according to Pro Football Focus. So I think if you see him on A.J. Brown, I don't know if he'll travel with him, but depending on who he's going to be guarding a majority of the time, I think you stay away from them and go to your other receivers. But I'm still waiting, like I said, selfishly for Dallas Goedert, but he's just so talented. And the fact he only has 11 catches in 3 games and only 63 yards is just mind-blowing to me. So I do expect a big game from him.
And a little bit more down the field out of Dallas Goedert. A lot of routes they've been running to him have been really short routes. You mentioned the 60 some odd yards. That's 20 yards a game. That's not good out of one of the guys that you like to profess as one of the best pass catching tight ends in the game. They need to up that mark. I just think it's a Smitty week. I think Devontae Smith has a bit of a breakout week. I don't know if Washington will travel Fuller to specifically cover A.J. Brown. I think you're right. I think they will try and go against Baptiste, their other corner. And I think Devontae Smith will get a lot of those matchups, which should be beneficial for him. Yeah. He's Bill Colarulo filling in for Johnny Mack, who had to get over to the NovaCare Complex for some Eagles insight. We've got, hopefully, Grant Paulson from 106.7 The Fan joining us next. We've had Grant on many a time to talk Commanders, back to football team. I think he even was on the show when they were called the Redskins. We'll hopefully punch up Grant Paulson next here on Birds 365.